Welcome back to another episode of I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention in about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Bastian Bergmann. Bastian is the co-founder and COO of Solston, a technology startup that empowers companies to create personalized content using AI and psychological data, and is also the founder of Technically Entertaining, a media strategy firm. Before that, Bastian was a strategy consultant at BCG and the founder and CEO of Wadex. His new book is Press Play: Why Every Company Needs a Gaming Strategy, which is something you might not have thought, but by the end of our conversation today, you might consider. Bastian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you along. So what do you wish more people knew?
I wish more people knew that almost 3.5 billion people on Earth play video games regularly. And that is not just a thing for young people. It's the only form of content, form of entertainment that actually cuts across all demographic groups. So it's a thing that is a lot more persistent than people would like to believe or that they typically know.
Yeah, we typically think of the gamer as maybe someone who's sitting in a basement just idling away hours in the day, but it's really not that anymore. And there's a really good case to be made that gamification isn't just a novelty, it's really a necessity when it comes to your marketing strategy. In the book, you talk about different things that brands and businesses are doing to meet this new moment. Can you tell us about some of the ways that they're making gaming part of their business strategy?
Yeah, I think, it's a really good question. And one of the things that is important, because this idea of gamification in and of itself isn't new. There's books that were, that existed that came out in the early 2010s. And the challenge back then is it was a little bit of an abused word to an extent where people said, oh, great, let's copy some high level mechanics from video gaming. It's like, let's throw confetti on a screen when someone purchases their first stock on Robinhood. That's kind of how they started with that. And call it a day, and we have a gamified experience. And that's not really what it's about at all. It's a lot more complicated than that. It's a lot more complex, and it's also a lot more effective than that. First of all, it's important to understand that gaming as an industry, video gaming as an industry, is bigger than movies, TV shows, and music streaming combined. A lot of people don't know that. It's close to a $200 billion annual industry, continues to grow, single digit rates, but it's continuing to grow. And the importance around this, or what's driving this at the very core, is this idea of play. For us as human beings, to play is really important. And what video games effectively are is a digital manifestation of play. It's rules, tasks, goals, outcomes, and the loop starts anew. So games are extremely engaging for humans. They're really immersive, and they're great and extremely powerful at helping us learn new things. So that's kind of given rise to this whole space of why brands are now all of a sudden paying attention to that, because, well, consumers are spending a lot more time in gaming and in gaming environments than on social media, for example. This is certainly true for Gen Z and Gen Alpha. So when you look at this space at large, it's roughly 3.3 billion, going on 3.5 billion people that play. It's people like my father-in-law who at lunch on Sunday between courses will pull out his phone and start playing Royal Match, which is a very big mobile game. He would never consider himself to be a gamer, but it's those types of people. It's, a lot of us, almost all of us, certainly more than 80% of the consumer population that engage in these environments regularly.
Yeah, so it's becoming a natural part of life for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for brands, when you look at the space, that was also for me the impetus to even write this book. About 4 years ago, I was on a call with the global marketing leadership team for Danone. Evian water, Volvic water. Most people have had one of those two waters in their life at least once. It's an incredibly well-run company. There's some of the smartest people in marketing, and they wanted to talk to me about their gaming strategy and said, well, we're going to sponsor an esports team. And when I asked them the question of, great, well, what else do you guys want to do? The call got really quiet really quickly, and they said, what do you mean, what else do we want to do? And I walked away from that conversation thinking, wait a minute, these people aren't stupid. This is just such foreign territory. This is such uncharted territory that there's an educational gap that's here that needs to be filled.
So for brands looking to get started, where do they start?
And that's really what I try and do with the book, is break down the options of, well, if you are a company, if you want to get into the space, how do you do that? And I try to synthesize it in really almost honestly pretty simple options, where the first one is look for a game that already exists and integrate your brand into that game. The second one would be build a great game from scratch. You can shape the whole world to your brand, to your values, to what you want it to look like, what you want to represent. The third one is kind of like a summation of the two, but it adds a blockchain element around Web3 technology specifically because it offers additional pathways for monetization and ownership of assets for brands, connecting it to the physical world as well. And then the fourth one is what used to get called gamification, but it's actually how do you make video games a part of your product, meaning you're not traditionally making video games, but how do you think about actually integrating gaming content, or outright games into your services, into a core part of the products that you offer on the day-to-day. And that's really the high-level strategic playing field that brands can operate in.
Make the case for ROI, because someone listening to this conversation may think, well, okay, there's more eyeballs to command, there's potentially more dollars to collect, but why invest in a gaming strategy?
Yeah, great point. Well, the high level takeaway for me is it is the next social media. So in the early stages of social media, the ROI wasn't necessarily there, but when you were behind the eight ball, when things all of a sudden took off, you were left scrambling. So that's where, the numbers speak a very clear truth in terms of how many people are there, time of engagement, et cetera. Where you're absolutely right, and what you're alluding to is, an executive put this really well to me on a call last week, where he said, well, we still think they're glorified billboards. They're just digital. Because, one of the capabilities that is to an extent missing a little bit is the complete downstream tracking of, can I convert all the engagement, all the attention, all the eyeballs into, if I'm Adidas, I sold more jerseys, I sold more shoes, I sold more apparel. And the answer to that question is sometimes yes, sometimes no. And unless it shifts to yes, you can, and you can do it predictably, reliably, and fully transparently, that's when a lot more advertising dollars are fully going to shift. So I think for right now, why you want to be in this space is because you want consumers to be aware of who you are in the first place. And I'll give you a specific example. Burberry did an incredible partnership with a game called Blankos, run by the studio Mythical Games. It's a Web3 game. And what Burberry was pretty much struggling with was, if you think of the stereotypical Burberry customer, they'll go downtown, they'll go to the store, they'll try on maybe a scarf, the trench coat, whatever the items are there, but it's completely different shopping behaviors. But that's an aging customer group. That's a very limited and finite and shrinking market. So now, if Burberry wants to be relevant for the next phase of consumers, they have to go where those consumers are. Whether they're buying a Burberry trench coat right now or not is actually of secondary importance. Because if I'm not even known as a brand to this audience coming up, by the time they have the discretionary income to buy my trench coat, I'm not even going to be on their radar.
You're too late.
Exactly, because they'll have built brand loyalty with a bunch of other brands, and it's going to be exponentially harder for me to now bring them into my environment. So a lot of it has to do right now, specifically with younger audiences, around brand awareness, creating that awareness and building brand loyalty really, really early on. And what Burberry, for example, was able to do, they identified this specific game that was indexing pretty high on younger audiences, so like 18 to 25. And they actually launched a limited edition character set in that game in collaboration with the video game maker, and their new, I think it was the summer collection. So limited items, virtual items that you could buy to effectively kind of like deck out and equip your character with that. It took them 22 seconds upon launch to sell out the entire collection. And they made $225,000 in revenue with that in 22 seconds. But more importantly, they now had a highly engaging, a recurring touch point brand exposure that they could use, shape, and form ongoingly with the next wave of consumers that maybe at some point is going to go downtown into the store. But certainly their shopping journey starts online, and it starts in video games.
Yeah, you bought awareness, which in the life cycle of a customer is maybe the most important thing, at least to start out.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know that gaming could be used as a way to de-risk R&D. I thought this part was kind of interesting. Essentially, companies are testing new product designs through video games before they commit significant time or resources to them.
Mhm.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, there's a great saying, when you talk to executives at Adidas or Puma or anyone that is in this space, they're thinking of gaming as their digital warehouse. So you could actually almost crowdsource what you used to do with R&D, and then you stockpile a bunch of the latest, I don't know, Nike sneakers or Air Jordans or what have you, hoping that enough consumers would buy that. What you can now do in those environments, if you're Puma and you're creating a new shoe or a new jersey or a new hat, whatever it is, you can make those digital items really cheaply, very quickly, and you can launch them in those gaming environments to basically see in real time, well, how much demand is there? Are people picking up this item? Are they then actually using it to outfit their avatar with that hat? Are they going into other environments? Do they continue to wear that hat, and so on and so forth? Using that to start to predict, well, if we were to make the real world item of this, are we going to have sustained demand or not? So it's an incredible canvas to do that. And not only does it help with R&D, it helps with the entire warehousing and logistics chain. Because if you extrapolate the potential and the implications of that, I could theoretically go from, I have the data and the engagement data and the preference data from people. They picked up this item, send it to production. You have the exact, did 3D rendering, you have the exact specs. This is the amount, this is the quantity, these are the regions and the territories that we need to ship it to. And you go straight from production to it gets distributed to retailers, for example. So there's incredible time saving and just overall shortening of the logistics chain in that too.
It really narrows that feedback loop. So you're getting more insights more quickly than you would have before.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one of the surprising applications of gaming is on mental health and well-being. It's something you talk about in the book. And you discuss ways that gaming can be used as part of the therapeutic process, which can be pretty heavy and often difficult work. Do you think that serious games are a good idea?
That's a really good question. If I was to give you a very short answer, a very succinct answer to that, my answer would be no. And that has to do with serious games. And unfortunately, it's academics, it's doctors making games. Those aren't actual games. That's also when you look at, a lot of the therapy apps that are out there, or the things that doctors can today that are FDA approved that they prescribe to people, aren't actual games. They're task apps. Which then is why they're not as effective in treatment, because people stop using them. So behavioral adherence goes down because they're not naturally engaging, they're not stimulating, they're not quote unquote fun. So, but if you were to use actual games, real games, and you start with, well, what is an actually engaging, fun experience? And you effectively layer the treatment component, the treatment capabilities, the mental health component into that experience, but you don't go off of, I need you to sort colors or shapes into boxes. That's not a game, that's a task. So if you start the other way around, I think there's tremendous potential, specifically because if you look at the therapeutic journey, the therapeutic journey and the effectiveness of especially digital therapeutics, one of the biggest challenges that they have is behavioral adherence, which means people start their journey and then they stop taking their medication. They stop doing the thing that you need them to do. And that's why I see tremendous potential for video games in that context, because they are naturally engaging, because they have very good retention rates. They are stimulating for people. And I think that's a good mental model to think about this and where I think the potential actually is.
Yeah. So if there are any limitations, it's really a problem with the design, not the concept.
Yeah, exactly.
So beyond the implications for keeping a loyal customer base, there are some implications for learning as well. Yeah. What are some ways that organizations might be able to do that?
Yeah. One of my favorite companies out there right now is called TGA Company. They focus just on that. Video games for workforces around compliance processes, mandatory training that you have to do, and the third one, reskilling and upskilling workforces. So they're effectively providing, and I think McDonald's is one of their customers actually, where they've built video games to help people onboard into, here are the compliance rules that we have at McDonald's. Here's how we operate shifts within the restaurant, and the do's and the don'ts, and hygiene, sanitation, all those important things. And they're giving McDonald's the tools to do that with their workforce, especially where you have higher turnover or higher fluctuation, where you especially in the restaurant business, for example, where you constantly have to train and upskill new workers, for example. This has become an incredibly effective medium for them to do that. Another area that in that context fits really, really well is recruiting. So Roblox actually does this. They have a video game as a part of their recruitment process. If you're applying for a job at Roblox, they make you play a game, and it gives them all sorts of data on the background. On the funnier side, IKEA actually had an activation on Roblox, which this one's fascinating. They had a gaming environment where you could become basically an employee in an IKEA store and help people find items. You could serve the meatballs if you wanted to with mashed potatoes, all this fun stuff. And they were tracking how well people were playing that game and how good of a worker you were. And they started offering jobs to people that way. So you could actually earn money in game the better you played it. And then they offered people real jobs on the back end to come work for IKEA. They got 12 times more applications through that video game environment than for any other job posting that they normally put out on web. So yeah, I think the potential for that, if you're thinking about it from a workforce application area along that stream, are pretty profound.
I'd love for them just to build my desk for me. I would take that.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't that be great? Well, if there's one thing I've taken away from this conversation, it's that games are serious work and to play is human. Bastian Bergmann, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Thanks for having me, John.